Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Unfair Advantage podcast. Today, I'm excited to be joined by an entrepreneur who truly embodies the phrase pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Louis Vandervalk is the founder of Blue Crocus Solutions, a digital marketing company specializing in web design, SEO, and Google Ads for contractors. With a background in construction, a degree in mechanical engineering, and no formal business training, Louis took a leap of faith in 2019 to begin his business. Along the way, he faced through financial setbacks with coaching investments, and countless lessons along the way. Despite it all, Louis built his company on grit, determination, and the unwavering support of his wife, who believed in his vision through the hardest of times. Today, he not only runs a thriving business, but also shares his insights through his podcast, Marketing Without Rules, where he champions creative, out-of-the-box approaches to help business owners succeed. We'll talk about the lessons Louis learned through his challenges of growing his agency and his passion for SEO and marketing, and how he's redefining what it means to thrive in business and life. So let's dive in. Louis, welcome on.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Brad. Looking forward to
Yeah,
being here.
absolutely. So obviously I had that intro that I kind of walked through on there. But let's talk a little bit about one. I want to highlight your company and what you guys do. Adam McChesney, you and I are both connected with. He's one person that I've had on my podcast who is a quote unquote competitor of mine. I believe in the abundance mentality. I think you're person number two, who's a competitor of ours, which I love doing because it's kind of like
Here we go. You know.
we can talk about everything that we love, we're experts in, and all that stuff. But obviously, there's a little bit things that go different. I work with contractors and home service companies, but who we target, who we work with, and all that is different from company to company.
It's interesting. I just made a post today saying life isn't a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
Unrelated to the fact that we were going to jump on the podcast as competitors. I'm doing that in air
Mm-hmm.
quotes for
Yep.
those listening at home. And I was thinking, what made me post it actually was, I was actually thinking about, I've jumped in on coaching with Adam, and some of my best conversations happen with my competitors. And I think that this is something I try and help my clients understand and realize is you could be learning stuff from your competitors. Every time I'm saying that, I'm doing an air quote,
Yep.
because everyone has an X factor. Everyone is focusing on, a slightly different type of job typically, but
Mm-hmm.
there's the same struggles that we're all facing. Like maybe there's a pricing thing where we could all raise our prices. Maybe
Yep.
there's for us in the SEO and ads world, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that change all the time and every day. And if we're not staying on top of that, we're doing ourselves and our clients a disservice. And so I might know something you don't. You might have figured something out that I haven't. In fact, it's guaranteed that both of those things are true for both of us. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we're not interacting and sharing knowledge and sharing, the different things that we're working on, we're both missing out. And
Right.
it makes our world smaller, and we're just like stuck in our little offices thinking, crap, the world's caving in and everything's going
Yep.
wrong. When really there's answers out there if you can communicate with other people.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things like I made a choice. You and I talked about before hopping on here, like the shit that I've gone through as an entrepreneur leading up to this agency and the ups and downs and all that. And when I went all into my agency, April of, I was about to say last year, but now we're in 25. So April of 23,
Coming up
shortly
on 2 years.
after, yeah, I know, Adam had posted about like this new coaching program. It's not the program he's running now. And I was like, all right, I got two choices. I can just be afraid of him, or I can like, hey, why don't you coach me? Why don't you teach me all that stuff? And it's like he's now going a second time to where I want to be. And it's like, why not learn for the best? He and I hop on calls and like I show him my pipeline. I have that
Yeah.
much trust that he's got enough deals coming through. He's not
Yeah.
going to go through and grab deals off my pipeline, all stuff. He shows me his pipeline because he knows that I'm not going to go through and grab deals
Yeah.
and all that. It's like we've just built that trust relationship.
Well, and you guys are local too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, which
we
is
are.
even
I think
cooler.
I've
Like that makes
seen
I
him
think
in
that makes
person like twice.
that's how
Yeah.
it is with local, the way our lives work now. But I think that lends some impact to your story. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
even cooler that you're doing that as local
Yep. Yeah.
competitors.
Yeah. We're like, locals a broad term because you could be 45 minutes away from each other. Like we're like 8 minutes from each other.
Yeah.
It's like I pass his office all the time when I'm going to like Costco and all that
Throw
stuff.
eggs at
I'm
the
like,
window.
I probably should. So hopefully Adam doesn't listen to this stuff when I do throw eggs at his window. He doesn't
Yeah.
know that it's me.
I'll
So,
send you
but
some nice Canadian farm raised eggs. You can do it for me too.
there you go. There you go. Awesome. So obviously you and I are both in the marketing space. Marketing's broad. You could have content marketing, you could have websites, SEO, all that stuff. One of the things that I learned quickly and early on was like, for me, I got into the industry building websites. I've been freelancing building sites for 10, 15 years. Like when I was working my last business, we didn't have enough income for me to take a paycheck from that company. So I
Hmm.
was freelancing on the side, building websites for other agencies to be able to pay my bills and everything.
Yeah.
And so when I went all in, one of the comments that my wife made to me was, "You're going all in on this, but you're not chasing projects. Everything you do is going to have a monthly recurring thing aspect because I don't want to have to wake up not knowing if there's going to be a check coming in."
Mm.
Obviously, there
And
was
websites
some
are
of
pretty
that.
project based.
Yep. And obviously, there was a lot of that in between then and now, kind of where we're at, because you can't just get from point A to point B without doing the phases in between. Um, but for us, like one of the lessons I learned was like, I can't just sell one off sites. Like we don't take on one-off website projects. They have to come with like an SEO or a Google ad campaign with it. And that's just a choice that we made as a business in order to help us grow. Um, what were some of like those early lessons that you learned in your agency? Because for those who are listening, running an agency is not as fun as it looks. It's fun. It's a lot of fun, but there's a lot of these things that you learn in between hand that help you grow throughout the process.
Yeah. I think, our clients think that we just sit here raking in recurring revenue. And, there's cost to that. There's a lot of mistakes that come along with it, as in any business. But yeah, recurring revenue is great. We do one-off website projects, but then
Hmm.
the processes to work to nurture them. A lot of those
Yeah.
have turned into great SEO clients. Like we actually will take on like one-page websites. So
Okay.
we're considering if we'll still have that, but we take on one-page sites, and some of those have turned into our best long-term SEO clients. They
Yeah.
get started, they come to us, they just need something online. And then we add a few pages down the road, and then they're like, "Okay, I'm ready to go. Business is going well,
Hmm.
and I'm ready to go." So that has been something. But recurring revenue, if you're not having to chase the nut every month, it allows you to focus on the clients that you have.
Yep.
Make sure that the business is set up properly. Make sure that results are coming in, and it relieves a lot of stress for sure in the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, and this is where, like, I kind of want the core of this episode to go with to talk about the unfair advantage and everything is like the aspect of like not having that financial stability there, in a way. Like that was one of the things that went into it was like my wife's like, I'm not like, there's going to be financial instability with running a business. That's just
Yeah,
known. She's like, I want to mitigate that risk, and here's how you're doing it. And so like we may eventually get to the point where we're like, hey, we got some gaps in the pipeline, so we can't afford to take on these one-off website projects and all that stuff.
yeah,
But I was just in growth mode. It was like, how can I get as much recurring revenue as possible to the
it's a
point where
great
we
place to
just
be.
yeah, and like we just welcomed our first kid in the world, and it's like he was born November 23rd, and from then until like the second week of December, like I was almost completely checked out of the
Life
business.
pretty much stops.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
if you are doing but the revenue was still able to come in
yeah,
versus project based. If you just focus on building the websites and everything, like then in that case, like if I wasn't in sales mode, so obviously January is a reflection of that and going to be, but that was a decision that I made and kind of planned for and knew going into it. But the fact is that you have enough revenue coming in that outweighs your expenses going out. You'll be fine to do a month or so without sales if you're a founder, let's say, sales company like I am at the moment, like you
yeah,
are at the moment.
yeah,
And so that's where like the benefit is of the recurring revenue. The
yeah.
downside of it is like I'm sure every once in a while when you get those project based sites, you're like, oh, there's some extra cash flow coming in. We can do some things with this, and you don't necessarily get that with the recurring side of things. But one of the things you mentioned in like the onboarding form was like there was a moment, I guess, in which your wife had to basically call you and say, "Hey,
There's
do we
been a
have enough?"
couple.
Oh, a couple. All right. So can we talk through that? Because I've been through that too, and to the point where like my wife called me because she was crying because she was went to go get groceries. I mismanaged some money, this and that, and the card declined because there wasn't enough money in the account. She's like, "How do we get groceries?"
Yeah. So if we back up to 2019,
Yeah.
I just graduated. So I was a mature student. Graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering. I had done mechanical engineering design throughout my degree, so I kind of paid my way through. We got married in there, and our first kid came in 2019, right after I graduated. So I graduated in May. Everett was born in June, and then that kind of catapulted me into looking at, okay, crap, I need some time and
Mm-hmm.
flexibility in my life, which I'm probably not going to get as a career person.
Yep.
And I'm going to need some more income, potential with what we wanted for at the time. We have for now. It's complete chaos. Congratulations on yours. It's an
Thank you.
amazing time, and no sleep, and life just kind of goes in slow motion. But so I started looking, and that's how I fell into looking at an agency. So we went all in. I invested a fair chunk into a training program to get myself up to speed. Again, not having experience online or experience in business or that sort of thing. I had some marketing experience. I'd done some side hustle stuff, grown an Instagram
Mm-hmm.
channel, stuff like that. But we went all in August 1st, and then I got laid off or let go basically from my engineering position August 21st, I believe. So it was like 21 days after I started the
Mm-hmm.
business and invested like a fair chunk of money. What
Talk
happened
about
actually?
going all in.
Yeah, what happened actually is I was exposed suddenly to this whole group of entrepreneurs, and everybody was reading books and stuff, and I was just soaking it up, listening to podcasts that I'd never listened to the
Yeah.
content before. I'd never really been a self development junkie before that. Um, I probably can kind of lay claim to that now, but I read the 4 Hour Work Week, or got like partway into it, and he's like, if you want something, go for it. And I knew that I should be making more at my job than I was, because I had 4 years of experience with them, and friends of mine were getting out of university with zero experience, completely green behind the ears, and making more than I was. So I went to my boss and I said, this is what I need to be making. Let's figure out how we can do that. That was on a Tuesday. He came back on a Thursday and was like, pack up, you're gone tomorrow. So I went all in
Wow.
in both places, and then it was figure it out or not, and I had no choice. I had a new kid, I had a wife, and I
Yep.
had my bills to pay for. So
Mm-hmm.
and keep food on the table for us. So it was all in, and there were moments there. It was more than a couple. It's probably been 3 or 4 times that Alyssa's called and said, "Hey, I don't quite have enough. Just bounced at the register, and so I have to move some money around and transfer it." Um,
Yep.
and then we got better at managing it to make sure that there was enough before she went. But it was tight
Mm-hmm.
for a fair amount of time, and she never second guessed it. I never second guessed it. It was like I'm going all in. This is the route to where we want to be, which is having that flexibility for me to be able
Yep.
to be with the kids and take time off for sports and that sort of thing and travel. And she was incredible through that process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so one of the things I was just thinking about was my last company that didn't work out is we're in the pandemic, and I was in college. So I was finishing my undergrad. Actually, I was finishing my undergrad in IT, and I was doing an internship as like a software engineer intern. I hated software engineering. I have no idea why I wanted to go into that route. And I decided to go all in that last business. We had just gotten like proof of concept grant funding from the university. It's like 20 grand. I was able to build our MVP, everything. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go all in on this. Like, we're going to try to raise as much money as fast as possible so I can quit this job. And then I accidentally got pulled in with like, they basically parted ways and let go with all these contractors. I was an intern. I was a full-time intern. So technically I was employed by them, and I just got accidentally looped into that. And because of like all the COVID relief going on and everything like that, like I was kind of like keeping my mouth shut. I'm not going to fight this. And so it was kind of like that same thing. It was like in the moment, like when it hit me, and they didn't even tell me. I tried logging in one day, and like my login credentials wouldn't work. And I reached out to my boss, who was a new boss. Like she got put as my boss like a week beforehand. And she's like, so here's what happened. And I'm like, whatever,
Brutal.
it's fine. She's like, I can't really do anything about it. And so when you're talking about that, it brought back that memory, because I'm like, you decide to go all in on something, and all of a sudden like this happens, and it's like, I'm glad I went all in on that, because if I
Yeah.
hadn't, maybe this wouldn't have happened, or those types of things. But with the managing cash flow, that's one of our goals for 2025, is like doing better about managing cash flow on the business side of things. We've gotten very good on the personal side of things. The business still has its ups and downs and all that stuff. Some of our expenses on the business side aren't as predictable, with
Sure.
new clients and expenses and all that stuff. And so like we're going through all of that to, look at every client from a profit aspect and all those different things. But it's one of those things, like I remember growing up, like hearing about a time like when like my mom had to call my dad and ask like, is there enough money in checking account for us to get like bread? And
Yeah.
like that has been one of my life's mission, is like to make sure that that doesn't happen for like my family and everything. And then when it happened, I was like, you MFer, like
Just
you were
crushed you.
going down, the path, you were doing exactly what you said you weren't going to do. Now the flip side is, at the time, like my parents were both working a job, so like you can't exponentially control your income or your revenue, your input coming through. Versus we're in a position to be able to increase our input. Like my wife works a job right now; she's on leave with our son. But one of the things we were talking about is like we were both on separate insurance plans, this and that. Now, so in 2025, like we got insurance going through for family 3 versus last year was just 1. Then we got an FSA. Then we got a dependent child care account. And she's like, my take home pay is going to be nothing compared to
Just
what it was.
disappears. Yeah.
And I'm like, that's fine. Like you are not. Let me watch my words and how I say this. Like
She's
in a
listening.
way, yeah, it's like in a way, like that's fine, because all we need your income for is to pay the bills. That's
Yeah.
great, and to make sure that we have great healthcare. That's what we need your income for right now. If if you made nothing just to be able to make sure that we had great healthcare right now, I'd be fine with that, because the fact is, it's going to be a lot easier for me to bring in a couple extra thousand a month in revenue than it is going to be for her to go to her employer and ask for a couple
Yeah.
thousand more a month in revenue.
Yeah.
And so, but that's a lot of like mind training you have to do, because at first it was like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? It was like, oh, all I have to do is add on X amount more clients. You At first you think gross revenue, but then you start factoring in net profit and expenses and all that. It's like, okay, I got to add in X amount more clients, and then we can do this. Our deck on our house is about to fall off the house, so we're like, okay, we got a quote for like 12 grand for our deck, which honestly isn't bad. And she's like, I don't know where this 12 grand's gonna come from. I'm like, oh, I just got to add this many more clients. And like, she's like, well, what about? I'm like, I already got all the expenses, an additional team member I have to hire for those many clients and all that stuff already factored in there. Like, that's how many clients can bring in. We can afford that. And
The
so
deck
now we're getting to the
project.
point where you can like project those things, and it's like, oh, all I got to do is sell more shit, and I can afford more shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's really what it
You,
comes
you know
down
what's
to. So
you know what's cool is I talk about the investment in the business. I actually had to convince, I like to joke, my first sale was telling my wife that I was going to take the money we had saved for a bathroom and turning it into this training. But it's turned around because our roof and our deck, it's funny you mentioned the deck, because we got a similar quote. And then I did work for them online and basically traded services for our roof and for our deck. It was amazing.
okay,
And so it saved us a lot of money as we
yep,
were kind of in those like in between years, and I was able to
yep,
use the skills and then trade it. So
yep,
maybe there's a play to be made with your debt company
yeah.
there.
This debt company is actually a client of mine,
Oh,
and so
amazing!
I've toyed with the idea of that, but I've been burned a couple times on like the trade
The
aspect,
barter side of things, sure.
and so it's like he and I had a brief conversation, and I'm like, I'd much rather just pay you what you're worth, you pay me what I'm worth, and like we keep things as business
Yeah, yeah,
transactional as possible, because the last thing I want is like him to feel like he's got to keep on working with us as an agency because he wants to get his value in terms of the deck and all that stuff. I'm like,
yeah, yeah,
let's not do all that.
yeah. No,
But
that's fair. Luckily for us, it worked out. But
yeah, I have had those things where it has worked out, but I've had a few where I'm like, that was a waste of my time, and I spent more money and more time than it was even worth doing. That I should have just paid for this out of pocket kind of thing.
yeah, yeah,
So,
sure.
but oh, cool. So you guys go through this aspect of like she's asking like, or not asking us their money account, went to go purchase, and there wasn't a money account. It's funny is it happened to us the other day, but because I handed my wife a card that was like a year and a half expired, I was too busy doing
Really?
things. And I was just like, she was like, hey, I need a card. I was like, hand it to her. And then she like called me. She's like, this card expired like November of 23. And I'm like, huh? And I looked down and the other card for our
Just
checking account
hanging out
was
on your desk.
sitting right next to it. And I'm like, shit. So it was kind of funny because we were laughing because we're like, this happened, but when there wasn't money account.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
it happened just because we had the wrong card. But so you guys went through that aspect. And then obviously I always say that like my wife is like the forgotten co-founder in a way. She's the one behind the scenes that when shit's going wrong, when I'm having a tough day, like client cancels, there's this problem going on. I have an employee who's wanting to leave because he found a better opportunity. Do I try to offer him more money, keep him? All those things that go through this. She's the one that's kind of there. That's the sounding board for a lot of that, whether she likes it and wants to or not. And so I imagine you're kind of in that same
That
place.
last
And
point
so,
is the key one there.
yep,
Whether they like it or not.
whether they like it or not. And so you have to go through this mode where, like, I even made a comment. My wife and I were doing our 2024 review, 2025 planning. We began doing that together. And one of the comments I said to her was like, "Thank you for your growth this year." In 2024, because some of the conversations we had in November, December about growth for 25 were not things that we would have had a conversation about in January, February of 24. And it took a lot of growth of her to be able to have those conversations. And because we as entrepreneurs see things differently than a lot of people do. And so what did that process look like? And kind of like, I'm going to use the phrase training your wife, which is a wrong phrase to use. But you have to train your own mind. And so a lot of times you also have to do that with somebody else that you're working with or live with or anything like that.
Yeah, I think I just used this quote yesterday, but I heard it from Ryan Stewman that like entrepreneurship is a personal development program with a paycheck attached that depends how much you personally develop. And so if we don't develop as entrepreneurs, like I look at things and I'm like, well, if I didn't reach that goal, it's because of, I didn't develop enough. It's interesting because my wife and I were both thrown into the deep end on two different development paths. She had 4 kids in 5 years. And I, started a business from scratch. Like we pretty much started within like 2 months of each other. And so it's been very interesting for us both to navigate our paths and, come together on those paths too. Because sometimes it's like, survival on both of our sides.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that the training has been both ways, to be honest. Like she's growing and kids have an awful, I'm trying to think of words now and I just left you hanging with awful. Kids are awesome, but they have an awfully adept way of pulling out things in you that you haven't dealt with. I hate to use the word trauma because I think it's overused now, but stories or triggers or whatever it is in you that that come out when you're stressed and you're dealing with the kids. There's something there that's like really powerful. And we've both had to grow from that. And so it's like there's almost been as much growth on both sides, the business side and then the personal development side, through that, having 4 kids and just the complete chaos that is our day-to-day life. And the 2 seconds we can snag a day to even like, say hi as you're passing in the hallway in the middle of the night, going between the kids' rooms, right?
Yep. We have one, and it's like we were having the conversation of like, can we do this with 2? Can we do this with 3?
You're never ready.
Yeah. But we've joked about like what's our timeline, all that stuff. Like we plan on having 2 or 3, and so it's like, okay, like how soon do we want to make that jump? And I try to plan, and so I'm like, all right, but if we get past 2, then we have to move houses, and then I got this expense, and you gotta have your job until then because getting a house and a mortgage, self-employed is all those things, and it's like realistically you can't plan for anything. Like it's never going to work out as you want it to. I'm interested on the professional development side of things for your wife as a wife and a mother. Because one of the things that we've talked about is like, I want my wife to be able to come home from work. That's a conversation we've had. It's a conversation she's had with her employer. They know that that's like our long-term goal. They're very supportive of it. And so what it sounds like is your wife doesn't work a job. She is like
That's correct,
the chief operating officer of the house.
Full-time
Is
domestic engineer.
okay. I like
Yeah.
that. So, what is it like balancing that? And like, it's very easy for us as entrepreneurs to go sign up for a coaching program, for us to go buy more books to grow as entrepreneurs, for us to attend a conference for entrepreneurs. The self-development path is very, I'm going to use the word easy, but the finding the path is very easy.
There's
I
lots
think
of
finding,
coaches and programs being
yeah,
thrown at us all the time. Yeah.
I think finding that self, and we can measure a monetary ROI to that in most cases. I
Yep.
think finding that self development path for the mom on their side of things to be able to grow as an individual, as a mother, and all those things is not necessarily as easy to measure because you can't necessarily measure a monetary ROI. But there's other ROIs you can measure in that case.
Stress
And so,
factor
like,
when going out the
yeah,
door, all those things,
yep.
right?
It's like, if you don't mind me asking, what does that look like for you guys with her? One, because I'm curious, but it's also a conversation that like my wife and I have had. Like, I want her, like, we go to one of those like mega churches. They have a women's conference, happens every June. I'm like,
Yeah.
if that's what you want to do, every year that expense is paid. I don't care what's going on, that expense is paid because I want you to have that opportunity for you. So
Yeah, so Alyssa and I are very different in that regard. I'm very much like, I'm going to go get the training that I need. I'm going to call someone. I'm going to, grab the course. I'm going to, take advantage of
mm-hmm.
the training or whatever, or find someone who can teach me. Alyssa, so it's interesting. She's full-time domestic engineer. That's always been her dream since she was like 7, is to be a full-time mom. She's always wanted 4 kids. Luckily, I wanted 4 kids as well, so it worked out. And we said,
Mm-hmm.
rather than waiting, we'll just have them. Back to your point of, are you ready? You're never ready.
Yeah.
And we still look at ourselves, and we're like, what did we do? But from a development perspective, she goes inside a lot and really processes things and kind of develops that way. She reads a fair bit, and she also follows a lot of like Instagram accounts around self-development and parenting and stuff like that. So she picks up a lot of stuff from that. She also has 3 degrees. So she's got a degree in education, psychology, and social work. So a lot of that comes into play as well from a perspective of, okay, cool, chaos is happening. We're at odds over something. All right, cool. Let's get down to the bottom of it and figure out, what is it that's really bugging us? What is it that we need to, face internally for both of us? And then, we kind of grow through that. So we both have different processes, and we both kind of push each other in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of the reason why I'm asking is because we were doing our planning and everything. And one of the comments my wife made to me was, she was like, last year I had all these different goals. They were very much like, or the year before I was like, get a new job, get this, like income coming through, revenue coming through. She's like, this year, like my goals are more around being a mother. And it was like, is that wrong? I'm like, no, like let's go all in on that. It's incredible. And so, it's one of those things we were having conversation as you and I were talking. I'm like, let me just like ask on this because I'm
also
sure
you can tell her that like I'm sure you've told her this already, but like it's way harder than what we do. It's like for us it's like 4 kids. So she's with them like all the time, right? She doesn't get the break of actually going out of the house, right? Which is another challenge in on its own. And so you have to kind of manufacture in breaks. So like Tuesdays, actually, I'm as soon as we're done here, I'm taking the kids, and she goes out and does some shopping and whatnot, and errands and so on. Thursday we do the same thing, Thursday afternoon, and then the weekends I take the kids a fair chunk so that she can just have some space to do her own thing, because she's like 24/7 with them all the time. So you can tell your wife that she's actually doing something that's harder than what we're doing. At least I think so. I certainly can do it.
She is, because I'm like, there was the other night I was getting frustrated in the middle of the night with one of his bottle feeds and this and that, and I'm like, how does she do this all day?
Like all the time. Because she can't just stop.
Yep. Wow. Well, I will. I'll definitely be reaching out to you offline with a few questions there, because I love how you guys kind of have things laid out. Like Tuesday, this is her time to go do her thing and all that, because we've had some active conversations and everything.
And it's got to be. I can tell you what we've done. I'm certainly never going to tell you what to do because you got to figure it out because it's been
Yeah.
That's what we're doing currently. We've had different forms of that over the years, and I'm sure it'll look different next year. But yeah, the communication is important, and we failed at it a lot, and we've got it right a few times. So.
Yep. Communication is everything, whether it's business, personal, marriage, whatever. Like that's the one thing that I like pride myself in is like you just got to communicate. Sometimes I over communicate. Sorry, I want to make sure that there's enough communication there that like nothing's lost in between the lines. I'd rather over communicate than under communicate and be like, but you said or this or I didn't comprehend what you said and all those things. So it's definitely communication is huge there. So we've obviously talked through like this is honestly probably gonna be one of my most favorite episodes because I love talking about like the journey as an entrepreneur and like going through things. And now that I'm kind of going in through that phase of life that like you guys have been through and all that stuff, and we've had some of those overlapping situations with the groceries and bills and all that stuff. A lot of that comes down to I'll talk with people and they'll say, well, that sucks. Like I could never handle that kind of thing. I could never think about pulling out a no interest credit card like Brad did and be able to float like 10 grand on that for a year, knowing that a year from now, I'll be able to cover this expense and I'll just make the minimum no interest payment for a year. And I just know that I'll have the money by then to take care of it. Your average person won't take that risk. Your average person would have that card decline. Their wife call them and say, I'm done. I'm tossing towel. I'm going to go and get a 9-to-5 job. So for those who are kind of like thinking about whether going all in on an agency like you and I have done, or they're wanting to open up their own contracting business or whatever it is, like what advice would you give to those people? Like these challenges that we've talked about, because like they're shitty, they happen, but you and I are kind of like, yeah, they happen, but oh well, like we'll keep going. Like we've come out further and further and further ahead of that. So
I thought you were going to ask, what are you going to say to someone who's doubting it as they're in the entrepreneurial grind? And I was like, just
either
quit. I was going to say, just quit. If you got one foot out, like get out and move over and like do the thing that, like, if you're struggling to do it, and you're doubting yourself, then don't do it. But if you have that chip on your shoulder, if you will, because a lot of us do, then go all in and don't. I think burn the ships is a bit overused now, but burn the ships. Don't leave yourself a plan B, and look forward and figure out what is the steps I have to do now to get to where I want to go.
Yeah,
and understand it's going to suck. I was just chatting with my CFO yesterday, and I had a breakthrough. It was probably like year 3. I thought as you started earning more money, things got easier, and everything just magically, got easier, and everything was great. And it actually gets harder, and more bigger problems come down the pipeline. And that was happening to me, and I was like really struggling with it. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? And he's like, this is the way. Like, this is the path that you travel, and this is where you learn and you develop and you keep moving forward. So yeah. I mean, if someone's there or looking to get going or wondering, like, bet on yourself. That is the only thing you can control, and then do the work needed to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, it's one of those things like you just gotta talk to people. Like I had a conversation with my accountant. I was on the phone with him, and we were talking about like it's everybody's got debt. I used to like shy away from talking about it. The business has some debt against it, but we were talking about it, and he's like honestly, he didn't say this word for word, but the vibe I got from him just through talking, he's like, the debt to revenue ratio you got going on, like, it was almost like he didn't say let this revenue sit because he's not a CFO type person. He's like kind of like just let this debt sit because of like why use some of that cash flow and pay down this debt when you have this if you had a ton of debt, okay, now we got problems, but it was like it's very minimal. So it was like why use that extra cash flow? Like it was just talking to somebody to like comprehend that, like, oh, I'm not doing this wrong. Like this is the way I did this is okay. Every other business owner does it that way. We're like looking at doing some like those no interest cards that I talked about. Like 2 of them we're going to pay off. 2 other ones we're going to go through and just before that interest kicks in, we're going to consolidate that debt into a line of credit through a local bank, and I'm building a relationship with them. And when I'm having a conversation, he's like, dude, this is my week. I talk to
Yeah.
business owners all the time, talking through this stuff. Like what you're going through right now, that's nothing. It's like it's pennies compared to like what everybody else, like the bigger problems people are looking at.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting, kind
Definitely
of like
floated some
talking
expenses
through
on
it.
cards for a fair
Oh yeah,
fair while to get
yeah,
through.
yeah. And
Took
it's
out some
just
pretty
what.
high interest loans, because there was no plan B for me.
Mhm.
Got them paid off, but yeah,
Yep,
it's a grind, and it's
yep,
gonna keep you up at night, but you got to
yeah.
be bought in on the mission.
Yep. The one thing I will swear off of, so for anybody who's listening, don't ever do this like I did, and maybe you did this as well, Lewis, is I took like a merchant services financing loan through my payment processor. So I paid a flat fee, and then out of every sale I made, they took a percentage of my revenue,
Yeah,
which was just to pay back the loan. There wasn't additional cost on top of that flat fee. But then what happened was the percentage of revenue they were taking was so monumental compared to the revenue that was coming through that like it was putting me in even worse of a bind.
it was
And
just
so
putting a
like,
chokehold. Yeah, I've
yeah,
done
it was
that.
just putting it is put is
I,
putting a
I
chokehold.
didn't
It's
do
like,
a
go ahead.
I didn't do a merchant one, but I did some pretty high interest ones that I needed to get through a pretty tight
Mm-hmm.
situation, and it kind of made it worse actually.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's why like these no interest cards, they don't go up like out of interest till June, but it's January and I'm having a conversation with this banker because I'm like, I'm not going to let those kick into 28% interest,
no,
30% interest. That's
yeah,
not happening. And so there's actually a guy named Billy Klein who I had on the
oh yes, yeah,
podcast, and he mentioned this to me on the podcast, and like on that podcast I said like, yeah, I'd actually just made the choice and the decision like to swear off of those. I had He didn't know that at the time, but I had made that choice and decision on that recording with him because he had like I was praying for a sign like I can't be doing this anymore. And then I hop on this podcast recording, he starts talking about it, and I'm like, all right, I'm done.
yeah.
We're no longer doing this. And so you just
That's
have to
good.
like,
That'll be a big weight off your shoulders for sure.
yeah. And so you just have to like draw that line in the saying, I get the offer every time I log on a payment processor. They're like, you qualify for more of a loan. Like, I think the last time I logged in, they're like, you qualify for up to $180,000 with us. And I'm like, no, how can I
Tempting,
like
right?
disable this from me being able to
Yeah.
see this and everything? So, well, last thing before we wrap up here, what is it? Obviously, we're beginning of 2025. What does it look like for you guys in terms of like success? How you're wanting to grow your business and all that? We talk about like the financial struggles. A lot of it's making sure that you never go back to that,
Yeah.
but also just like amplifying like your financial abundance in a way.
So 2025 is about taking everything that we learned in 2024. 2024 was a year of paying off a lot of that debt actually for us.
Mm-hmm.
So a very, very sizable chunk of that. And so now moving forward to save up to 6 months cash in the bank, like operating expenses. That's
Okay.
the goal for 2025.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a great goal to have, is what I'm being told. We aren't quite there. We're about halfway there. So
Yeah.
it's one of those
Well,
things that
I'm
you
just
just,
I'm just getting started, so you're
yeah.
well on the way then. Like it was
I
like pay everything down, get that off, get that
mhm.
monkey off our back, and then start going where we want to go.
Yep. We talk about coaching programs and masterminds and all that stuff. I just surround myself around people who are more intelligent than I am, and that's the only way you can kind of cut through some of these hoops and potholes and everything like that you have to jump through in order to get
Yeah,
to
yeah,
where you want to go. Well, Louis, thanks again for hopping on here today. For anybody listening, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that 5-star review so we can continue to produce more episodes like this. And if you're looking to be on our podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out on Facebook or LinkedIn. My handle is at Brad Starnes Official. And until next time, this is the Unfair Advantage.